So one of the things that I learned during that time as well, which is not running, which is actually the opposite of running,
Yeah.
was meditation. Um, and for me, I had always considered running to be my moving meditation. And when I would say that, real meditation teachers are like, it's not. It's very different.
Hey everyone, it's Tony Will. Oh my gosh, I can't wait for you to meet my next guest, a Women In. We were talking off air and she's fantastic and you're going to learn a lot from her today. But before you meet her, let me tell you what you're listening to. Women In is a podcast that celebrates women from all walks of life and the people who uplift them. Each episode features incredible voices from my world, sharing stories that spark inspiration, challenge the status quo, and remind us that empowering women empowers everyone. This is a bold, curious, and uncensored space where disruption is welcome, forward thinking is encouraged, and change is the goal. I'm passionate about breaking down barriers, not just for us, but for the next generations. Whether our paths cross professionally or personally, these conversations matter. Let's dive in and celebrate the power of connection, growth, and the people who are shaping our world, and this woman is definitely one of them. Kettia Ming is a Haitian immigrant, entrepreneur, writer, and cultural leader based in New York. She founded Smarter Toddler, a Manhattan-based childcare company that grew from a single basement location to 4 thriving centers before being acquired by Bright Horizons in a multi-million-dollar deal. Her experience navigating the sale, a high-stakes legal battle, and strategic bankruptcy became the foundation for her debut memoir, Run the Mile You're In, One Founder's Journey Through Success, Loss, and Reinvention. Kettia currently serves as the executive director of Black Theater United, where she works at the intersection of art, activism, and institutional change. She writes the Substack newsletter, Run the Mile You're In, exploring the lessons that emerge when things fall apart and what it takes to rebuild. She lives in New York, and the power of technology is bringing us together. Hi, Kettia.
Hello.
Welcome to Women In.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I was really excited when I learned I was going to be on your podcast. So I'm excited to talk to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and if you guys aren't watching this and you're just listening, you can't see the beautiful medals that are hanging behind Kettia. So I told her I wanted to start there, and I'm imagining it's all tied into the name of your book, which just came out. She's coming fresh off a launch party last night, and which congratulations, it's a very big deal. So tell us about the medals first. Like, what you're a runner, I would say, yeah?
Yes, I am a runner. And I fell into running. I used to run in high school, but I hated it. It was like one of those things, like, I had no choice. That was the sport. And I sort of started running in earnest, like as an adult after I had my third daughter. And I was just trying to lose some weight, like just the jeans didn't fit and whatever the top, the clothes didn't fit the way they should. And I thought, you know what, I'll just get on the treadmill. And I remember walking at first, very slowly, just trying to make it to like 1 mile, right? And then ultimately made it to like 2 miles, but I was like kind of walking, running, whatever. And then one day, it took a while. Like, so this was not like from week to week, it was probably like a few months where I ran 6 miles, like 6 whole miles on the treadmill. And I remember being so excited. I ran home and like opened the door and like said to my husband at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, I just ran 6 whole miles on the treadmill. And he was like, oh, that's great, honey. You bet you could run a marathon now. And I literally took that too hard. I was like, yeah, I think I will. And that's how I signed up for my first marathon. Like, yeah, just from the treadmill.
Okay, I was too a runner back in my 30s. I spent that whole decade running and doing triathlon as a hobby as well. So I did both. And
Yeah.
so have you is it straight running, or have you done other sports in that?
It's pretty much been straight running. I actually really enjoyed it. Once I started running, I don't race anymore. I don't sign up for races or
Yeah.
anything like that. I still run, but I don't train. It's another job. Like a lot of my friends are runners. I still have the running community has just always been so amazing, and I love being a part of that. And I do run just for fun. I don't race anymore. But yeah, I've never done a triathlete because I'm not that coordinated or balanced, so I'm not the best on the bike, I'd probably fall and break a few bones. And I'm not the strongest swimmer.
Yeah.
So yeah, the most that I could do was run. Yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about what was your first marathon?
New York.
New York.
Yeah.
Okay, so you ran the New York City Marathon.
Hmm.
Talk about it's not often I get to nerd out on this stuff because
Please nerd out with
yeah.
me. I love it.
So talk about the training. And what
Mhm.
year was it? What year did you run your first marathon?
So I ran New York in 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did your training plan look like? And did that include, I want people, like one of the questions I get
Hmm.
just in general for women in midlife is, I don't know where to meet people. I don't, and you mentioned a running club, and I know I
Yeah.
was part of a triathlon club and running clubs. And so
Yeah.
did you start in that space or were you running on your own or what did
I
that?
was sort of running on my own, and I remember thinking it would be great to meet people, but I didn't know how, like, do I just go up to the group and started talking? I didn't know what to do. But in New York, we have so many run clubs, and of course, New York Roadrunner being the ultimate running club in New York. And I remember they had a board, like that you can go online on their page, and they would have a board, like a community board, right? And people would post like, oh, I'm looking for a running partner at whatever time that works for you. And I remember posting something on there, right? And I wanted to meet people who were running at 5:30 in the morning, because that was the only time I could run because I had to go to work. And I hated running in the evening. That wasn't gonna work for me. So so somebody responded, and then I kind of got myself a stalker, but that's a whole different story. But then another person, I'll never forget her. We're still friends today. Her name is Francine. She's the leader of the Flyers Run Club in New York. She reached out to me. She's like, "Oh, we have a club. This is the Flyers." She introduced herself, and she's like, "We meet at 6 a.m." And I was like, "Perfect." And then I started going with them, and yeah, I'm a flyer to this day. I don't race or train or whatever, but I'm still once a flyer, always a flyer. It's a great community. In fact, there's a Flyers book club, and I am going to read my, like sort of, I've been invited as a guest on their book club next early June to talk about my book. So I'm very excited for that. Yeah.
That's really cool. So was your
Hmm.
first training, I'm trying to think back to mine because mine was
Hmm.
2009. I ran the Detroit Marathon and
Okay.
I think I trained, if I recall correctly, for about 17 weeks. I don't,
Okay.
does that sound, I can't remember. It's been a long time, but it was a while.
Yeah, I didn't train that. So the problem with my first, it was really bad. I ran my first in at 5:55. I always remember those numbers. So
Okay.
I was dying. I was half dead. And I remember thinking, I will never do this thing again. This is crazy. Who does this? And then as soon as I crossed the finish line, I was like, I could do better. Like, that's not the end. And then I went back and trained for the following year and ran New York again. And this time I did it in like 4 hours and like 21 minutes.
So what was
So,
the
yeah.
difference between your training? What would you say? Because running it in 5:55 versus 4:21, that is a 90-minute, give or take a couple minutes
Yeah.
improvement, which is phenomenal. So
Yeah.
what did you do differently?
Well, for one thing, I train outdoors. So the first marathon, I was super busy with work. I was running a business. My kids were very young, and I thought I could just train on the treadmill, right? And I did a lot of run on the treadmill, but I didn't understand about long runs. I didn't understand about speed runs. I didn't understand about strength training and all these other things that make up your entire training season. And yeah, and I suffered for it. I did some runs outside. I also overtrained a little bit, like where I was running too fast when I shouldn't have. I injured myself a little bit. Also, I had shin splints, like the whole thing. So the first marathon was pretty brutal for me because I really just didn't know what I was doing. And then by the second one, again, so now I was part of the running club. And so I had met people who knew what they were doing. The club was incredible at like the different runs. Twice a week we would meet and we would do these different runs like fartleks and speed runs and this and that. And so I learned all these terms, and then I started Googling, of course, and just really educated myself because I really wanted to do well and really just didn't want to be in that kind of pain. That was some serious pain for the
Oh,
first one. Like, and
sure.
yeah, and training different, it definitely made a huge difference. Yeah.
So the one thing I asked Kettia before we hit record, I was like, "Tell me about the framed one," and because I've got one framed one, but
Yeah.
it's from when I did an Ironman. But
Ooh,
yeah,
so
that was a whole
cool.
other beast. But you
Yeah.
ran the Boston Marathon,
Mhm.
so talk about that because you did qualify.
I did qualify. So the qualifier race to me was probably and still is my most favorite race so far. I've ridden 13 marathons
Okay.
total. The qualifier was my absolute favorite race because I trained so hard for that race. When I tell you, it was like my job.
Mhm.
It was my second job. I trained like someone was paying me to run,
Yeah.
And I had tried so many times. It was the sixth time I was trying to qualify. This was my sixth marathon that I was trying to qualify for Boston. And I was like, I just knew, I was like, I'm going to make it. I ran that race in Erie, Pennsylvania, because it's flat and, the conditions are good. And I did my research and I was ready. I knew like that weekend before I went into that race, I was ready. I knew I was gonna qualify. I was like, yeah. And I ran with a girlfriend who was trying to qualify also, but ate sort of fueled badly and ended up just like having, stomach upset. And so she didn't make it during that race and she did it later. But yeah, I aced that race and that's why it's framed. Yeah.
What that marathon? What did you run it in?
4:49.
That's the one you
Not
qualified.
sorry, not 4:49 because I had to qualify for 3:49.
3:49. I was gonna say.
Yeah,
And then what was your experience like running the Boston Marathon?
it was hot. It was one of those hot years. In Boston, it's very weird. You don't know what you're gonna get
You
weather-wise,
don't.
and so it was a hot. It was one of those hot. I ran Boston in 2016. It
Okay.
was a hot, hot day. And I remember thinking, pretty much, even as we lined up before I ever hit mile one, I knew all my goals were out the window. I was like, you have no goals. Like, you're just gonna run, you're gonna finish, but no goals. And because I didn't want my brain to mess with me, like, oh, you're not gonna, I was hot. Everybody was hot. We were all like, we were sweating. And by mile three, it was in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to finish and I did and it wasn't terrible. I still came under like 420, it was like so it wasn't bad, but I know I could have done better. Yeah.
So what do you think running taught you? I mean, now you run for pleasure, you're not racing. Similar to
Yes.
me, I stopped racing in
Yeah.
2017 is when I was 39 turning 40 and I'm like
Hmm.
I got out of this part of my life what I was supposed to. So
Yeah.
what do you think running taught you?
Oh my gosh, so much, so much. I mean, where do I start? But I will give you like just the basic. For me, running is very much like life, right? Like you get out of it what you put into it. That's what I learned. That's the biggest thing that I learned. Um, the same thing with, when you have goals or whether it's a business or whatever it is in your life, like whatever you're putting in is what you're going to get out. And I learned that when I trained, I did well. And there were times I would train, like, listen, you're not in control of the weather. Maybe whatever your stomach decides to do that. There are certain things that you're not in control of. But what you are in control of, if you can make sure that you take control of those things, then you'll do great. And I feel like that's the metaphor for life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I absolutely loved running and
Mm-hmm.
um I I learned and just listening to your story, I learned too like how sometimes races don't go our way, sometimes they do, and that's kind of like life. It's just
Yeah.
but you know what? In your story and similar to mine, I had different stories. Like I broke my shoulder blade prepping for my first Ironman, had to withdraw, blah blah blah. But
Yeah.
I healed and I went back. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't give up. So I think running also taught me grit and resilience and some really hard races that as I've moved into my career and different projects I've worked on, I've often drawn on that experience to say,
Mm-hmm.
Tony, if you can run that marathon or do that Ironman, you can write a book, you can do a TEDx,
Yeah.
you can do these things. So I've taken that.
Yeah, it gives you so much perspective.
Yes.
A lot more than it just like you just said, it teaches you that you can do hard things.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, an Ironman, my goodness, yes. I'm in awe. I'm in awe of people that can do Ironman. I have friends that do it. So yeah, I love it.
I did too, and I was like, I'm good. So
Yeah.
Okay, now tell me about. I want to talk about the daycare.
Okay.
And that your business and what happened during the sale of it, and that led to your book, correct? If I'm reading your bio, I want to hear
Yep.
the story. And does the title have to do with your love of running?
Yes, it does. So I'll give you the short version. So I started a daycare in my home because I couldn't find childcare for my daughter at the time. She was 15 months old. And it was, I somehow talked my husband into like, hey, we live in a duplex. Like we can start it downstairs. And, at this time we have 3 kids under 5, right? And so we're like, okay, so we make it happen. And what I realized is that while I started it out of necessity, there were lots of other moms that had the same problem as I did. I just didn't, once I started it, there was a huge demand, and it grew fairly quickly. And I grew that into the first 2 commercial centers I opened almost right away, like within 2 years of opening the center in my home. I ran those centers for about 11 years, sold them to Bright Horizons, and then I took about a year hiatus and then went to reopen 2 new centers, which I did in the financial district in Manhattan and in Williamsburg. And then I found out, which literally happens the day after I ran Boston, that's where my book starts. The prologue is like the day after I ran Boston. I'm on my way home on the Amtrak when I get the first email from Bright Horizons that there's, I'm in breach of contract, blah, 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 super legal. And so the clause in the contract was a non-compete, which I knew about, so this wasn't a surprise. So the non-compete was I couldn't open a new center or do the same business within 1.5 miles of any one of their centers, right? And so when I opened up the one in the financial district, I measured it, I ran it, I garmented it, like you name it. I did the whole thing. I measured all of it, and I was within I was perfectly clear of that 1.5 miles. So what they came after me for was that they said I was 100 feet within that non-compete, but not 100 feet that you could walk, like as a human, but 100 feet as the crow flies. So that's how they came after me. As the crow, like literally the way the birds fly.
That'd be hard to determine because birds fly.
Because birds fly, right? And there was no way, yes. So it was incredibly, just shocking. And I didn't know that term. I'd never heard of that term before. That was the very first time I ever heard that. But that's a legal way of measuring distance. And it's real. It's a real legal way of measuring that. And so that's how it was 100 feet within as the crow flies. And then it's what happened after that, like the fallout and all the things I had to deal with during those years that almost crippled my business. They basically wanted me to go out of business because they did not want to compete with me. And they wanted me to shut my doors. We had to go to court. So there was this whole legal thing that went on and on the first 3 years of me reopening my business that sort of sucked all of the air out of the business. And it's all of the tools and all the resources, like mentally and spiritually, that I had to draw on to deal with those years and keeping my business afloat. It kind of threatened everything, like my family, what was going to happen financially, because we had literally sunk in all of like the proceeds from the sale into these new businesses. So I was obviously very afraid about what was going to happen. Kind of like when people like will mortgage their entire home to like start a business. So you like, what's going to happen if the business, so that's the position that I was in. Right. So it was a very, very scary time in my life. And I remember the only way I learned how to deal with these challenges was through, like I ran a lot during those times. Like I would wake up in the morning and I would run and I would come up with solutions, and it would be during those runs that I could literally breathe. Because at work, I was not. Like I was just dealing with just one putting out one fire after the other after the other. So it was constant. So yeah, that's where the title of the book comes from.
So I was going to ask you, and it makes sense that it's the what's within your book. But if you were to pull out, let's say, one or two things that beyond running that helped you stay grounded during tremendous amount of stress and worry and fear and uncertainty and the unknown, what tools are they, or what helped you and that you're passing on to the people who read your book?
Like, and I did learn that. I learned that it is different because your nervous system responds to it differently, because you are sitting in silence and you are. Then the type of meditation that I learned, it wasn't like the kind where people were like, clear your mind of everything. And that's one of the things that I really liked about it, that it wasn't that, because it was impossible to clear my mind of everything. So it was more like understanding that you're going to have all of these thoughts, positive or negative, but that you are not your thoughts, and that these do not define who you are or the actions that you need to take today. It was a way to sort of make space for me to deal with all of the things that were going on in my life. And it was very, very hard, because during that time I had very young kids who were sort of preteens, and then the oldest was 17. So it was, in my house was always very chaotic and very loud, and just to find a space for me to quiet or to like just take a moment for myself, it was in my bathroom. I had to like close the door to the bathroom. But those were the two things that kind of worked hand in hand. And then the other thing that I did during that time as well, and I know that some people talk about that, and I was never into it, but I started doing that, was journaling. And it wasn't like a long, I wasn't writing a book. It was just like, it would just be thoughts that I would wake up in. Sometimes it would be like something that I would think about, and I'm like, oh, that's a good idea, or like, I should call that person, or that could be a solution to this problem, whatever. And I would write it down, right? And it would help me to do that, especially at night, not so much in the morning. At night, it was a good way for me to just throw down everything on a piece of paper so that I could go to sleep. It would help me if I could write it all down. So that was another tool that helped me a lot. Yeah.
I'm curious about this, the strategic bankruptcy. I pulled your bio back up because I want to make sure I use the correct language. I'm intrigued. Tell me about that. It's not, I understand both words, but I mean, it's a strategy. So I want to teach me, because I want to learn.
Yeah, of course. So that was something I had to learn, because I didn't know about that. When you hear people talk about bankruptcy, right? It's always in the context of the business is doing poorly, and so we can't pay our debtors or investors or whatever, right? And there's a certain stigma attached to it that most people are like, well, I don't want to do that, and I don't recommend it if it's not for the right reasons, right? But so what was happening is, because of the sort of constraint and how hard it was, that the settlement was to pay Bright Horizons $1.5 million. That was what it was. It's like from the beginning of my business, in order for me to open my door, that was the kind of settlement that we had to come to terms with them. It kind of crippled the business, right? So while the first two businesses had done so well, and it's a huge cash flow business, and we were able to obviously sell it for so much to them. Now, all of the money that we had poured back into the new businesses, every month I had to pay them a certain amount, and that kind of really just strangled the business. And so there were times when, I couldn't pay rent, or I couldn't, because I had to sort of prioritize. Obviously, my biggest thing was payroll, safety, and materials and supplies and things for the school. And then the bigger bills became like Bright Horizons, and then the rent. So that's kind of how the priority went. So there were times when I couldn't pay for certain things, because it depends on what was happening, or the month, or during the summers were really slow. And we started to fall behind more and more and more. And we got to the point, was like 3 years. I think we were about 3, 4 years in at that point, where my business advisors were like, we need to do something to get you off the ledge, right? Because you can't continue like this, because you, on paper, it looks like you make money, but you really don't, obviously. And that's the reason you can't pay. And they're like, we're going to put the company in bankruptcy. And I want to be clear, the reason also is because at that point, my husband at the time, we were also going through a really, really rough time, and our marriage was on the rocks, and I know we were probably going to get divorced. And the one thing that I wanted was to sell the business, but to properly sell the business so that we can disentangle like all of the finances, so that if we were going to get a divorce, that, you know, that was taken care of. And so my business advisors, my attorney was like, we're going to do a strategic bankruptcy. And this is what it looks like. We put the business in bankruptcy. And what that does, it opens it up to buyers to say, oh, okay, so this business is in jeopardy. Let's bid on it. So it's almost like a bid, like they come out and they're like, you know, and the first few bids were very, very low. And I talk about that in the book as well. Like people like that are like vultures and kind of like just circling to try to grab something. And we knew right away they weren't serious. They just wanted to get a deal. And then we started to get real offers. Like real other companies came in and started to bid like real offers. And one of those companies was KinderCare. So KinderCare is another very similar to okay. Yeah. So KinderCare came in, they put in a bid. We could tell it was serious, and then we started, you know, negotiating with them, and that became my second sell. Yeah. So I sold to KinderCare.
Do you feel like stigma is something I work really hard? I'm passionate about chipping away at stigmas. And where this spurred for me was I quit drinking almost 6 years ago, and there's a stigma associated with if someone chooses not to drink. Now it's getting better because more and more people are seeing that alcohol is, you know, ethanol just packaged up real nice to sell and make big profits for big alcohol, and it's not great for your health. But I'm not judging anyone who does it, and Lord knows I drank enough in my day. But there are stigmas attached to it. So I decided when I quit drinking in 2020 that I was going to quit out loud to help shine a light. Like, you can quit just because you want to. You don't, I mean, the term alcoholic doesn't have to be applied to anyone who chooses not to drink. So I've been really vocal. And I see the same, I mean, you wrote a book, you're talking about strategic bankruptcy, it's in your bio. Is that by design, Kettia, to remove some stigmas from the bankruptcy lore?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's something a lot of entrepreneurs don't know, especially people that, like, you know, you own a small business. Like a lot of daycares tend to be small, you know, mom and pop businesses, right? Like, you may have seen my business and thought that's not so mom and pop, because we, you know, at some point I had over 50 employees, right, between the two schools. And yeah, but it's still a small business. And a lot of people are in a bind with their business, but they don't have someone advising them of the different strategies or the different tools that are available to them, and how to go about navigating that. And I would not recommend you do this yourself at all, unless you have a legal mind and you can get through all of that paperwork and kind of know, you know, and there are people that are like that. That wasn't me, right? So I would recommend certainly you reach out to a professional and be like, hey, I heard this. What do you think? Would that apply to me? Is that something that I can do? Like, so just really ask all the questions and be curious, and don't let whatever, you know, you read about or hear on the internet or people saying you can't do that or whatever. Just make sure that you get all the information that you possibly can that's available to you, and get all the counsel that you can to find out if that's something that could work for your business. And it's not a get out of jail free card. I really, really want people to understand that. It's not like, you know, we're going to do this and then we're just going to skip. That's not what it's about. It truly is a way to kind of get you to the other side of however you need to restructure your business in order to keep going. And if that's a sale, then it's a sale. And if it's a restructure and then you sort of get that money in that you need to get in while you take a breather from your debtors, then that's what you do. But it is something that's available to you.
It's very helpful and interesting explanation
Hmm.
and strategy, and
Yeah.
really matter of fact. It's
Hmm.
based on facts, not emotion. And bankruptcy can
Right.
bring up a lot of emotions, but if you stick to
Hmm.
the facts of what it is and what it isn't, it takes the stigma out. So,
Exactly.
okay,
Exactly.
tell me about the decision to write a book. So, is this something you've always wanted to do? I often find it interesting when people write about things that could bring shame. Like, there's a lot of vulnerability, it sounds like, in your book,
Hmm.
and it's not
Hmm.
easy to do. So, what made you decide that you wanted to write a book? Have you always been a writer? Because I know you're in the arts, and you're creative. So, tell me about that decision and then the writing process and publishing. Because, as you and I both know, writing and publishing are two
So different.
totally different things.
So different. I wish someone had told me that.
Me too. Me too. So we are going to help anyone listening today because they are audience. They are two totally
Yes.
different things, and
Yeah.
it is a project, capital P. So take it away.
Yes. Yes. So, the idea to write this book, I remember even when I was going through this whole thing about 10 years ago with the legal battle, I remember my sister, who lives in Baltimore, had said to me, she was like, you should write this down. You should write a book. And I was like, I wasn't in a space that I could write a book. I was in it. I was trying to survive it. Right? I wasn't in a place that I had distance or perspective. And if I had tried to write anything back then, it just would have been angry. Like it wouldn't have helped anybody. And years had gone by, and I remember sitting in so I had done this 10 KSB with Goldman Sachs, and I did it because of the nonprofit that I am currently the executive director for. And they have speakers who come in all the time and talk, like for each sessions. And there's this one speaker who said something during her day that she was talking about negotiations, actually. And she said something about your mess is your story. And I remember sitting with that term, like it just kept like ringing, in my head. And I remember thinking about that. And deep down, I was like, yeah, I've always thought this whole thing was such a mess. And I wonder what it would be like to like just write about it. Like, and just to sort of put it on paper, maybe I can finally get perspective from that time in my life. I also was starting to not remember everything. And I think my brain was trying to protect me, honestly,
Yeah.
because some of it was just so traumatic. And so I remember sitting down at my computer. It was either that night or even the next day. And I started writing. And what came to me was that scene on the Amtrak. That was the first thing that it just was so clear to me, as if I was like back on that train, like sitting on that train, coming home from running the Boston Marathon, opening, flipping through my emails and getting that email. That was the first thing I remember. And I wrote that down. I wrote it down exactly as I remembered it, as I felt it. And that became the prologue to the book. Once I wrote that down, I knew, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to keep writing because there's so much more to write here. And I kept writing it. And the prologue took me into like, how did Smarter Toddler begin? Like, what was the genesis for that? Why did I do it? Why did I open a business? How did I go from, a fashion major to I'm running a childcare center? So it was all very interesting. And at first I was writing it down almost like journaling. And I remember one night specifically, I couldn't sleep. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I started writing. And I looked at my computer at the bottom, and I had like over 100 pages at that point on my computer, and I was like, oh my god, like I guess I'm gonna just keep writing. Anyway, long story short, I sent it to someone who I knew was in publishing, not to get it published, but to get her opinion, because that's somebody that I trusted. And I was like, hey, I wrote this. It feels like my journal, but I also feel like I would love for people to know this story, like just to tell my story, because I think it's time. And I didn't hear from her for like a really long time, and then she DM'd me on LinkedIn, and she was like, hey, you know what? We can't publish it because they do historical fiction, which I knew.
Yeah.
She's like, but I know someone that can help you. You need an editor. She's like, you have a really, really great story here, and you should publish it, but you need a really good editor. Because right now it reads very personal,
Yeah.
and it's like a journal, which is very, very good. And there's so much more to your story, and you should have an editor help you. And she connected me with an editor, and and I have to say, I have to give so much credit to my editor. She was incredible. She was incredible. She got stories out of me that I didn't know were there. Like,
Yeah, same.
yeah, I would send her pages, and she's like, I want this, and I want, like, I want you to take me into the room. The reader wants to know more about you. The reader, like, she was so thorough. Yeah, and she really helped get the stories out of me, and sort of made it make sense for the reader.
What
Yeah.
route did you go in terms of publishing? Did you choose self, hybrid, or traditional?
Self.
Okay, you did choose self.
I
And,
did.
and did you, so just so anyone knows, I asked,
Hmm.
there's three, and I didn't know any of this either, so I've learned a
Hmm.
ton. And so just out of curiosity, why did you choose self-publishing? There's no right or wrong answer, by the way.
Yeah. No, no, no. I know. Yeah. So I'm gonna tell you why. I could have gone the route of finding an agent, sending proposals, and yeah, I certainly could have done that. But I realized having an editor, and I that's how much confidence I had in her once she started helping me flesh out the story. I would read old, pages that I had written, and it was like there were times when, like, literally I was so touched by my own story that I wanted to cry. And I knew that I didn't want to wait to be picked. And that sounds crazy, but that's just how I am. I'm just an entrepreneur at heart, and I was like, I didn't want to wait for somebody to tell me whether or not I could tell my story or whether or not they would publish my story. So I was like, I am going to do it. And I had my editor help me a lot because she's in that world, and she also runs an agency where she works with a lot of self-publishers, right? Published writers. And so she kind of really guided me. And I thought, okay, I can do this. Like, I've built businesses, and I know how to run. It's not the same thing.
No.
It's not the
Oh
same
my
thing.
God.
It's very
It's
different.
its own business. Like,
It's its own business.
publishing a book is its own business. And I
Yeah.
say that because, again, no one told Kettia and I this, and here we are coming together, and like having the same shared experience and
Yeah.
saying the same things. And so that's kind of like, I'm so glad that we're both being able to express that, and someone can learn from us, because it's not bad, it just is. And so
Yeah.
if you know it, and I don't know how you feel, but I think if I would have known, I don't know if I would have done it. So I'm kind of glad I didn't know.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah, no, it totally. Ignorance is bliss with certain things, for sure. Yeah, because we don't know. I really thought that writing it was the hardest part.
Me too.
Right? Like, yeah, like standing in memories that I did not want to revisit. Like, I thought that was the hardest part. I was like, now it's done. The manuscript is done. It's finished. Like, seeing the cover, seeing the graphics, I was like, it's done. Like, what else can, just enjoy it? No. And then there is, like, promotion and marketing, and people tell you the most horrible, like, statistics.
Yeah.
Like, oh, one out of whatever, 1,000, it's like 1 out of 1,000 authors make it, or it might even be less than that. But it was like,
They do.
I'm not looking at that. Yeah,
Tell you,
exactly.
how about this one? Less than 5% of books sell more than 500 copies.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's one
Yeah, I
of
was
those.
like,
It's,
and they're like, well, it's not going to be yours.
I know, I'm like, don't tell me the shit. Okay, we're gonna pivot
Yeah.
a little bit, but
Yeah.
throughout our interview together, women have been coming up in this interview, and I wrote them down. Francine was the first one. You mentioned your daughter, your sister, your editor. So I just happened to be listening for all these women that you've mentioned throughout the interview. But in addition to these women, and you might want to expand on them more, who are the women in your life that helped you become the Kettia that sits in front of me today?
Oh my gosh. So many. But I would say my mother. My mother is a very, very strong woman, and she passed that gene on to all of her daughters. I have 2 sisters. I'm very, very close to them. I call them my first best friends. And we are very, very good friends. We're very, very close. And then I think ultimately my 2 daughters, who are incredible women in their own right, like 24 and 26. Watching them grow and turn into the women that they are today. Like, I'm just so filled with pride, and I've learned so much from them. I've learned as much from them as I thought they were learning from me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, and then of course, oh my gosh, my friends, like I have my best friend, who's an actor, and like we've known each other over 30 years. I have a lot of very, very close girlfriends. I have a very great circle of women that I call friends, and I'm super grateful for them in my life. And I saw all of them last night, which was incredible. They all came out to support. So yeah, I've been very blessed to have a great community of women in my life that I'm inspired by. Yeah.
So, Kettia, you have a lot of women that lift you up, especially last night's a great example. How do you lift women up?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that I am passionate about is where I am in the stage of life right now, which is just such and because so many of my friends are going through the same thing, is this reinvention that we are all kind of dealing with at this stage in our life. And I listen to friends talk about like feeling a certain way, or not wanting to rock the boat, or feeling stuck, or whatever it is that is just kind of off about where they are. And I think we've all kind of been there. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about talking very openly about is that there is no sort of age limit on reinvention, or deciding to pivot if something doesn't fit. But I think a lot of us kind of feel like it's like the devil we know. And so we don't want to make a big change. We don't want to, you don't want somebody to be like, "So what are you doing? Why would you do that? Everything is so." And so I'm just like such a like, listen, if it's not working for you anymore, you owe it to yourself to find the other, whatever it is that will get you out of the feeling of being stuck. So I'm a huge advocate for that. I talk about that all the time to all my friends, and I'm like, yeah, I love to listen to people, because you get so much from just listening and then seeing where they are and how you can meet them there. So I'm always there for the women in my life in that way. It's like, how can I help you best, to be your best self? And not because I'm so great, but because I've been in so many shoes where people are like, how did you get out? How did you do this? How did you hang on? How did you? And so I feel, qualified to talk about that.
Yeah,
And that's what I bring to my friends. Yeah.
beautiful. All right, a fun question. We have two questions left. A fun one. Okay, in terms of travel, there are two types of people when it comes to travel. The one who will only pack a carry-on, and one that always checks a bag. Which one are you?
I check a bag.
It does happen. Hey, listen, I am crazy. I will not pack a bag. It's like I'm allergic to packing bags. I will pack in a carry-on. But I just find it fascinating because I think I'm crazy because I just
No,
refuse.
you're not. You're smart. I always pack too much.
Yeah. I'm trying to work on that. I was so proud of myself last week. I traveled and I wore everything except one outfit, which is, in my estimation, that's a win. So I was like, that's
Oh
pretty
my
good.
gosh. Yeah. No, I need to learn that. I'm still learning that. Yeah.
To
Yeah.
each his own. So, last question, Ketcha, where can people say the name of your book again? Where can they buy it? And where can they find you if they want to learn more about you?
Sure. So the name of my book is Run the Mile You In. And the book is sold pretty much anywhere books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online, all the bookstores online. You can just do a search and it'll pop up. You can also buy it directly from my website at kettiaming.com. If you buy it on my website, there is a discount code which is called, it's launch 26.
Okay.
So like for book launch, so launch 26, and it's like 30% off
Okay.
from my website. But it's at Kettia Ming, KettiaMing.com.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Women In. I'm so honored to meet you and
Yes.
hear your story. Congratulations on the book launch, and I can't wait to read it because I'm gonna purchase one as well. So,
Yeah.
congrats, and
Thank you so much.
yeah.
And thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Oh, well, it's an honor. If you all are looking to connect with me, I'm not hard to find. The hockey side of my life is at kwings.com. And then my book, Rebellious Success, is at tonywill.com. You can pre-order now, and it'll be in your mailbox August 11th. And then I'm on all social media platforms as well. And until next time.